Why can't you just have fun like normal people? Why are you always locked in your dark room reading your nasty old books? Why do you have to be so creepy?
Forget it, B. Leave her alone.
I'm not creepy. I'm just different. And I wish there was someone around here who understood that. Someone I could talk to. Someone more like me.
Hey, Star Riders, welcome back to Sincerely Yours, where every chapter is a new adventure. Grab your pens because today we're stepping into the shadows. Today I'm pitching a Raven movie that treats magic like no wonder, but like fear. Not like fantasy, but like a curse you have to survive. Because Raven's story isn't about learning how to be powerful, it's about what it costs to keep that power under control. As we dive into Raven's story, ask yourself this: what happens when the darkness inside you isn't metaphorical but alive? Raven is one of DC's most emotionally layered characters, but I think the thing that makes her truly stand out is that her story doesn't naturally fit into a traditional superhero mold. Raven's story is not bright, triumphant, or even openly inspirational at first glance. It's intimate, it's eerie, it's isolating, and if you really lean into who she is, Raven's solo movie shouldn't feel like a standard superhero origin story at all. It should feel like a psychological thriller with supernatural horror at its core. Because Raven is not just battling villains on the outside, she's battling inheritance, she's battling prophecy, she's battling the terrifying possibility that the worst thing anyone has ever said about her might actually be true. At the center of Raven's story is a girl who has been taught from childhood that her emotions are dangerous. Her anger is dangerous. Her love is dangerous. Her attachment is dangerous. She's been raised with the understanding that if she loses control, even for a moment, something catastrophic could happen. So, from the time she is young, Raven is not taught how to live with emotion. She's taught how to suppress it, discipline it, and fear it. And that is such rich material for a movie because it means Raven's conflict is built into her every waking moment. She's not like Bruce Wayne, where trauma happened and now she responds to it. Raven is the kind of character where trauma is built into the way she was raised. Her whole world is shaped by caution, silence, restraint, and this constant pressure to remain emotionally still. The movie will frame Raven not as someone discovering powers for the first time, but as someone who has spent her entire life trying not to unleash it. Her powers aren't exciting to her, they're not liberating, they're terrifying. And they are tied directly to her identity, to her bloodline, and to the one truth hanging over her life. She is the daughter of Trigon. And in this movie, Trigon isn't just some villain waiting in the third act to show up for a boss battle. He is a looming psychological presence embedded into the story from the very beginning. He is in the whispers, in the nightmares, in the moments Raven thinks she's alone, in the quiet manipulations that make her question whether her thoughts are truly her own. This movie is about a girl raised to fear herself, raised to believe that one mistake, one emotional crack, one moment of weakness could open the door to something ancient and monstrous. So, the heart of the film becomes this: Raven is trying to figure out whether she is doomed to become the vessel of her father's evil or whether she can define herself on her own terms. And that right there, that makes her movie feel different from every other Titan. The tone of Raven's movie should be deeply unsettling, intimate, and atmospheric. This is not a loud joke every 5 minutes superhero film. This is one of those movies where the silence matters, where the camera lingers too long, where a hallway feels ominous for no obvious reason, where the audience starts to feel as emotionally cornered as Raven herself. If I were describing the tone, I'd say this movie lies somewhere between psychological horror, supernatural thriller, and dark fantasy drama. Think of the emotional collapse of Dark Swan, the inherited dread of Hereditary, and the quiet, creeping unease of the Babadook, but filtered through a DC lens. This movie should feel like a haunting before it feels like a war. Fear doesn't come from jump scares every 5 seconds. It comes from tension, from stillness, from Raven not knowing if what she's seeing is real, and us not knowing either. Visually, I would want the movie to begin with control, structure, symmetry. The world of Azarath should feel calm, muted, and disciplined, almost beautiful, but in a way that feels emotionally sterile. Soft grays, deep blues, pale silvers, violet shadows, everything neat, everything quiet, everything held in. Then, as Raven's internal state starts to crack, the film's visual language starts to shift with her. The world becomes more distorted. Reflections behave strangely. Corners of rooms feel too dark. Sound drops out unexpectedly. Time feels slippery. Background figures may appear where they shouldn't. The line between nightmare, memory, and reality becomes less reliable. And that's why psychological horror works so well for Raven. Her powers are already emotional, her fear is already internal. So instead of the movie only asking, can she stop the villain, it's asking, can she trust her own mind long enough to survive this? The horror should also be personal. Raven isn't just afraid of Trigon as this distinct cosmic demon. She's afraid of becoming what she represents. She's afraid of hurting people. She's afraid that closeness lead to destruction. She's afraid that love itself is a trigger. So when the supernatural moments hit, they shouldn't just be visually cool, they should mean something. A room collapsing under her grief, shadows whispering during panic, a mirror showing Trigon's silhouette when Raven looks at herself too long, the environment literally responding to her emotional instability. This movie would be less about magic fights and more about emotional terror made physical. Raven's power doesn't just blow things up, it warps the atmosphere around her. It makes the world feel wrong. And that makes her movie one of the most stylistically distinct in the whole lineup. Cyborg gives you techno thriller, Robin gives you grounded action, Starfire gives you cosmic wonder, but Raven gives you dread. Plot of Raven's movie doesn't begin in a city or with action or even with magic. It begins in Azarath, but in this version, Azarath isn't just Raven's home, it's her conditioning. Azarath is an isolated spiritual dimension built on peace, discipline, and emotional restraint. The people there aren't cruel, but they are careful because they understand something the rest of the world does not, which is Raven is dangerous. Raven wasn't raised like a normal child. She was raised like a living fault line, and Azarath didn't just teach her how to meditate, they taught her how to survive herself. As a child, Raven is quiet and observant, already aware of the tension people try to hide around her. She is cared for, especially by Aurelia, but even that love is restrained, gentle, measured. No one wants to trigger something, so she grows up protected but not fully embraced, watched but not fully known. We see it in small moments such as Raven meditating alone while others keep their distance, objects floating when she gets upset, a teacher calmly guiding her back to control, and lastly, nightmares where a voice speaks from behind a closed door that doesn't exist. And that's where the sadness comes in because Raven's childhood isn't abusive, it's tragic. She is loved but cautiously, guided but not understood, protected but quietly feared. Aurelia knows more than she says. She understands Raven's emotions are tied to something deeper and trains her not just in discipline, but containment. These aren't just lessons, they're safeguards. And one defining moment in the movie that I will highlight would be a young Raven asking why she can't laugh, cry, or get angry like everyone else. And Aurelia telling her, because your emotions are dangerous. That line defines everything. And as Raven grows older, things escalate, whereas shadows begin to replace where the light should be. She hears whispers during meditation, but no one's really talking. And finally, blackouts where her power acts on its own. And then she finally sees him, not fully, just enough, Trigon, not attacking, but watching. She starts to question, am I afraid of my powers or is my powers teaching me to be afraid? And eventually, Raven uncovers the truth. Azarath wasn't just protecting her, they were preparing for her, monitoring her, hoping discipline would keep Trigon dormant, but it's no longer enough. The breaking point comes during an emotional surge. The temple bends, the lights die down, and a black wave of energy tears through the sanctuary. People are hurt, and for the first time, they don't look cautious, they look afraid. And Raven finally understands what they've always believed. Raven is the end all be all. So she leaves, not out of anger, not out of rebellion, but out of fear. Because she doesn't run because she hates Azarath, she runs because she loves it enough not to destroy it. Outside Azarath, everything gets worse. The world is louder, messier, overwhelming. Emotions are everywhere, and Raven feels it in all direction. She tries to stay detached, hidden beneath her cloak, but without Azarath's structure, her control starts slipping. We see it in small moments such as a stranger's anger triggers a telekinetic burst. A crowded train floods her mind with overlapping thoughts. And lastly, a moment of grief causes a street light to explode. And the scariest part, she doesn't understand which thoughts are her own and which thoughts are Trigon's, because Trigon's presence grows stronger, closer, more personal. She sees him in reflections, hears him in crowds, catches glimpses of impossible spaces creeping into reality, like something is bleeding through. Meanwhile, Raven searches for answers, digging into occult texts, tracking prophecies, and encountering those who don't see her as a person, but as a doorway. And that's terrifying because for the first time, she sees herself the way others do, not as a girl, but as an event. And Trigon doesn't tempt her with power, he offers relief. You don't have to fight anymore. Let me carry it. And that's what makes him terrifying. He doesn't come as a monster, he comes as comfort. By the final act, Raven's reality collapses inward. This isn't a physical battle, it's psychological. The world becomes a shifting blend of memory, reality, and nightmare, such as twisted versions of Azarath, endless corridors, statues crying black tears, voices repeating with new meanings. Raven is trapped inside herself while something else tries to take over. This isn't just a fight, it's Raven's mind turning against her. Trigon finally confronts her fully, not as a beast, but as a voice. He shows her visions of Azarath being destroyed, cities collapsing, people fearing her, and future where she ruins everything. You're not a hero, you're the end. And for a moment, Raven almost gives in, not for power, but for peace, because she's tired of holding everything in. But then she realizes the truth. Suppressing her emotions is what's been feeding him. So instead of shutting down, she feels everything: pain, anger, fear, love, loneliness, all of it. And instead of breaking, she stabilizes. She doesn't win by becoming empty, she wins by becoming whole. Raven reclaims control of herself and forces Trigon back, sealing him, not destroying him. The real victory is real, but uneasy, because he's not gone, just contained. In the final moments, Raven steps into the world again, not cured, not fixed, but grounded. For the first time, she understands control isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about choosing how to live with it. And for a post credit scene, we be able to enter a dark room where we see screens, files, surveillance footages, and Raven's image appears. Then a green skinned boy, a half mechanical athlete, a masked vigilante, a glowing alien signature belonging to an alien princess, and finally a voice speaking, they're starting to surface. Raven's character development in this movie is all about the journey from repression to self acceptance. At the start of the film, Raven believes control means denying herself. It means staying detached, remaining calm, never letting anyone get too close, never allowing her emotions to rise high enough to put anyone in danger. She sees herself not as human but as Hazardous, and that's heartbreaking because it means Raven has never really been allowed to exist as a full person. She's been surviving herself, not living as herself. And that is the tragedy at the heart of her arc. Over the course of the movie, Raven learns that emotional suppression is not the same thing as peace. In fact, suppression is part of what's making her vulnerable. By refusing to feel, she's leaving herself fragmented, unstable, and full of fear and shame. And fear and shame are exactly what Trigon knows how to exploit. So her development is not about becoming more powerful in the traditional hero sense, it's about becoming more integrated, more emotionally honest, more willing to see herself as something other than a disaster waiting to happen. Aurelia also has a meaningful arc here, too. She loves Raven deeply, but her love has always been filtered through fear. She trained Raven to control herself, yes, but she also passed down the belief that Raven have to live cautiously, quietly, and separately from others. Aurelia's intentions were protective, but the emotional result was distant. And I think that complexity is important because Aurelia shouldn't be villainized for it because she is also tragic too. This mother daughter relationship is painful because the love is real, it's just shaped by fear. And Aurelia wants to save Raven, but in doing so, she also helps teach her to fear her own heart. By the end of the movie, Raven's growth is subtle but powerful. She doesn't become an open book. She doesn't suddenly trust everyone. She doesn't become less gothic, less mysterious, or less guarded. That would feel false. Instead, she becomes more anchored. She understands herself better. She chooses connection as a possibility rather than a risk she must always avoid. And most importantly, she no longer sees herself solely as Trigon's daughter. She sees herself as Raven. Even though this is Raven's standalone movie, it should absolutely feel like part of a larger Teen Titans universe. The key is to make the Easter eggs feel eerie and organic, not like the movie is stopping every 10 minutes to scream, "Look, franchise setup." So, one subtle Easter egg could be a Gotham case file on unexplained youth vigilantes or metahuman disturbances. Maybe in the background of a scene, we could see a report on a circus tragedy survivor now linked to unusual criminal activity. It's quick, understated, but enough for fans to catch. Another could be Star Labs detecting unusual dimensional energy signatures matching Raven's power. That likely connects back to Cyborg's world without stepping on Raven's spotlight. Another could be while Raven is sitting back in the night watching the night sky, she sees a green strike flying across the sky and then probably some other silver gold lights following after it. That could be a subtle hint of Starfire probably running from her sister. I mean, I would run from Blackfire too if I saw her. But then there's Beast Boy, who I think would be the perfect soft breadcrumb in Raven's film. Not a full appearance, just a strange, almost cryptic moment. Maybe Raven sends another altered soul nearby. Maybe a green raven or green tiger in a dreamscape becomes a visual motif. Maybe in the real world, a green monkey on a rooftop watches her for a second too long before vanishing. Something weird enough that first time viewers brush it off, but Teen Titans fans instantly clock it. And because Raven's movie is psychological, the Easter egg could be more symbolic too. They don't all have to be literal cameos, they can feel like destiny circling the edges of her story. Post-credit scenes should do the heavy lifting. As someone, whether it's Slade, Hive, or another Illumi manipulator, is beginning to notice these extraordinary young people. Separate stories are forming, threads are tightening, and Raven, even without knowing it yet, is one of the centerpieces. Raven's soundtrack shouldn't sound like a traditional superhero score. It should feel haunting, restrained, and emotionally invasive in the best way possible. I imagine it makes a dark ambient score, eerie choral textures, minimalist piano, and a few carefully chosen artists whose music feels intimate and ghostly. Think artists like Billie Eilish, FKA Twigs, Banks, maybe even some ethereal cinematic sounds that blur the lines between lullaby and nightmare. This is the kind of soundtrack that doesn't just support the scene, it unsettles you. It whispers, it lingers, it makes you feel like something is wrong before the movie tells you it is. The score should use silence strategically too. Silence is Raven's language. Long, quiet stretches where all you can hear is room tone, breathing, fabric moving, distant whispers. Those moments should make the horror land even harder when music finally swells. For Raven's emotional scenes, I lean into melancholy piano and layered vocals that feel almost sacred. For Trigon's presence, I want low, distorted sound design with choral elements that feel ancient and wrong. Not just villain music, but cosmic dread music. And if you want one phrase to sum up the soundtrack vibe, it would be beautiful but corrupted. Casting Raven is tricky because the actress has to do a lot with very little. Raven is not a character who explains herself constantly. She's internal, restrained, hyper aware, so the performance has to communicate pain, intelligence, emotional suppression, and quiet strength without overplaying any of it. So here are my top three picks to play Raven. Jenny Ortega. Jenna Ortega. She has the perfect mix of stillness, starkness, and vulnerability. She's really good at playing characters who feel emotionally guarded while still letting you sense the turmoil underneath. She could absolutely carry the psychological horror angle. Amandel Stenberg. She brings emotional intelligence and subtlety to performances, and I think she could really nail Raven's internal conflict. There'll be a bit of softness there, but also a sharpness that could work beautifully for Raven's more psychic and emotionally complex scenes. Isabella Merced. She has a range, emotional depth, and a grounded presence that could make Raven feel deeply human under all the supernatural heaviness. She could handle both the fragility and the steel. The actress playing Raven has to make you believe she's carrying an entire storm inside her while barely letting a drop hit the surface. And that is very different from casting someone for a louder superhero role. Raven needs someone magnetic in the quiet sense. So that's the Raven movie I'm envisioning. A psychological horror superhero film about a girl raised to fear her own emotions, a girl carrying the bloodline of something monstrous, a girl trying to decide whether destiny is something you inherit or something you fight. This movie matters because Raven's struggle is so deeply human, even with all the demonic and supernatural stuff layered on top. Fear of yourself, fear of hurting people, fear that what runs in your blood determines who you become. That's heavy, that's personal. And that's why this movie would hit so hard. It would give the Teen Titans universe something bold and different, something atmospheric, something emotionally raw. It would prove that not every superhero story has to feel the same. Some can feel haunted, and Raven, she deserves that because her story isn't about being the loudest hero in the room, it's about surviving the room when the darkness starts talking back. So, what do you think, Star Riders? Would you want a Raven movie that leans fully into psychological horror and supernatural thriller energy? And what part of Raven's story would you want to explore the most? Azarath, Trigon, her childhood, or her road towards finding the Titans? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I would love to hear them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell to join the journey through the stars for more out of this world ideas. Until next time, keep your pen to the stars and your heart in the pages. Sincerely yours.